You know the slogan, I must accumulate them to completion. Something like that. Well, I've forgotten how that goes. There are also plenty of games featuring everyone's favourite Pokemon. Not that one. Oh, get the flamethrower, please. That didn't exactly shape childhoods. Well, maybe some did, but not for all the right reasons. I'm Jimmy, and if you're looking for the video game versions of Watchog, I actually quite like Watchog. I think he's pretty neat, even if he is a massive gross. Here are the Pokemon games that time and basically everyone has forgotten. Right, I've got a dash. Barring the odd mini-game here and there, the only racing game in the franchise is Pokemon Dash. It's not the worst game ever made, but it's no F-Zero, is it? Developed by Umbrella, who we'll be seeing quite a bit today, this game was a launch title for the DS in Japan and Europe, and released in the system's early months in the US. Naturally, this also meant that the game heavily incorporated the DS's touchscreen and stylus to showcase it to the world. Pokemon Dash is a top-down racing game based around finding and hitting a series of checkpoints in a specified order. Controlling Pikachu, who is the only playable character, but they presumably didn't call it Pikachu Dash so they didn't have to pay him royalties, involves repeatedly swiping the bottom screen in the direction you want it to move. There are a few factors at play, like terrains that slow you down, power-ups to negate that penalty, and the use of balloons to take to the skies and find a landing point to continue your run. Apart from the standard courses, Pokemon Dash features a few extras, like an expert mode that makes races non-linear, a time attack mode, and special hidden courses unlocked by inserting a Generation 3 cartridge into the GBA slot. Neat. Unfortunately, Pokemon Dash failed to ignite any passion among players and critics alike, with GameSpot even going as far as to call it one of the laziest uses of the DS's touchscreen technology to date. Don't worry, GameSpot, they'd get way lazier. Pokemon Dash may be the only racing game in the series, but it's certainly not Umbrella's only game as a whole. Let's hop back in time just before Dash, but don't change the channel. Bit of a genre buster, this one. Released in 2003 on the GameCube, this Umbrella-developed title can best be described as a simulation game where you watch TV with Pikachu, and you don't have to give him bits or super chats to get him to acknowledge you or anything. There are just over a dozen channels to flip through, including a shopping channel to buy things for your room and a quiz show hosted by Wobbuffet. There's also a day and night cycle that's linked to real-world time via the GameCube clock, and you can also explore the areas of Mintail Town, the game setting that also comes back for a game much later. There's also wild Pokemon and collectibles to find. Your overarching goal is to be the test audience for a new TV network, which means reporting to Professor Oak on how Pikachu feels about each of the TV channels you watch. Given that the core premise is literally watching television, there's not really much interactivity to be had, unless you boot up the Pokemon mini console under your bed, which features minigames all taken from the real-life Pokemon mini system. As you'd expect from something that borders on being a mindless time waste instead of a real game, Pokemon Channel didn't impress its audience. Its only real selling point is the inclusion of an exclusive anime episode, Pichu Bros in Party Panic. Given that Umbrella dashed into other genres after Pokemon Channel, this TV watching simulator never got a chance to establish a proper legacy. Because, you know, how far can this concept go? Babe Station with Pikachu? This isn't the first or last simulation-esque game by Umbrella, however. Let's browse forgotten corners of the web for now. My Watchog's chilling there. Say hello, Watchog. Do you remember back in the day when they used to make loads of browser games to promote like a brand or a movie? I vividly remember playing a browser game for the Dawn of the Dead remake, where you'd, in IT class, where the zombies would like be jumping over the fence, you'd have to shoot them. This was like some 21 years ago. Pokemon was also no stranger to a browser game. Or 20. To promote the banger that was Pokemon the Movie 2000, Nintendo and the Pokemon Company took a unique approach, handing the keys to the series to Warner Bros. And developer Cyberworld International. When this game was released, however, it became clear that Nintendo got way more than what they had bargained for, and rather than make the most of it, they shut it down in classic Nintendo fashion, citing a breach of contract. Made on a budget of $2 million, this game not only used its own dedicated browser, it was a 3D adventure that featured mechanics like multiple difficulty settings, which modern Pokemon needs, teams of Pokemon to choose from, and even the ability for some of them to evolve. From there, you're sent to explore 3 islands in any order you wish. Within the islands are Pokemon to observe, trivia questions to answer, obstacles that require your Pokemon team's ability to overcome, and even random events that can potentially lead to your Pokemon being stolen by Team Rocket. The overarching goal is to reach Articuno, Zapdos, and Moltres, and answer their trivia questions to obtain the ancient spheres they're guarding. Despite Nintendo's efforts to quash a perceived threat, Pokemon the Movie 2000 Adventure was already a success during its short life, with over 1 million downloads. The developers had also been paid for their work, got to see the movie before release, and Warner Bros. Still had a successful marketing campaign. The movie itself was a box office hit, and while the game was seemingly lost to time, thanks to the help of Did You Know Gaming and some of the game's ex-devs, it was brought back from the graves of Lavender Town, a win for game preservation and the final nail in the coffin of Nintendo's hostility, having been kind of pointless. And they never shut down any game again. Next up, we've got something for all you cowboys. For the hardest of the hardcore, those who will enthusiastically accumulate to completion and then come up with some kind of weird Dune-esque headcanon for their 12 different Pidgeys, some extra storage space comes in handy with their Pokemon games. To cater to those needs, Nintendo has published a number of storage apps over the years, with the most current one being the subscription-based Pokemon Home. It was far from the first. In 2008, our mates at Umbrella were the ones to take a stab at giving players that extra storage, and the solution they came up with was the WiiWare's My Pokemon Ranch. While all of Pokemon's other storage software simply expands upon the box interfaces from the actual games, My Pokemon Ranch actually puts your Pokemon into a ranch where you can watch them meander around, take photos, or shake the Wiimote to cause some chaos. There's a few other niceties here, including milestone goals for depositing certain amounts of Pokemon, requests for specific creatures, and even trades with Haley, the ranch's owner. Japanese players were also treated to an update that added compatibility with Pokemon Platinum. Unfortunately, My Pokemon Ranch, beyond the fact that it's now unavailable due to the Wii Shop channel shutdown, is held back by one deal breaker. The Pokemon you deposit can only be returned to the specific game and save file that it came from, which means that unlike all other Pokemon storage apps, you can't just deposit your Pokemon and start a new game on a main series title. If you deposit a Pokemon and then erase the save file of the game it came from, it's trapped on the ranch forever. It's like my first cat, Sooty. He's been on that farm for like 25 years now. I hope he's alright. Wait. It's a shame because despite the negative reviews, My Pokemon Ranch at least had more charm than its predecessor and eventual successors. But if the slow pace of a life on a ranch doesn't suit you, perhaps we can interest you in this next game. I already did that joke. Park yourself down, maybe? For a series as expansive as it is, there are shockingly few action-based games where you take more direct control of the Pokemon themselves. There's Pokken, which is a pretty neat fighting game, and there's Rumble, which is simplistic in gameplay and uses a super deformed, low-poly art style. I hate looking at it, and I hate whoever brought it into this world. And then there's the Pokepark duology for the Wii. Released in the early 2010s, these games are a strange mix between action-adventure and minigame compilation. As the name suggests, these games all take place in the titular Pokepark, a large multi-zone theme park inhabited by Pokemon. Rather than being multiplayer party games, these are single-player, story-driven games where you take control of Pikachu. The first game has Pikachu embark on a search across the park for pieces of the Sky Prism that once protected the park, while its sequel explores a new threat called the Wish Park. In both games, this means befriending Pokemon and calling on their abilities to proceed in the story. Doing so involves one of a few simplistic minigames: you hide, you seek, you chase, you obstacle hop, or you quit. On occasion, you'll also be challenged to battle, in which case Pikachu, or Snivy, Tepig, and Oshawott in the sequel are tasked with beating down their opponent with limited time and health. Even if you're aware of the game's targeting a younger demographic, those looking for depth, or even just more of the combat, may still be disappointed. As the Metacritic scores and fan testimonies can suggest though, these games still found a small audience of fans who yearn for their return like Pikachu yearns for that quick buck. I really would love to do a video on like weird Wii digital games that have disappeared, like the Stunfisk fan club over the years. If this thing touched holy water, it would die. Next up, let's have a ball. Joe, can you like turn me into a pinball and then like bounce me across the screen? Yeah, that's close enough. I'll do. This 1999 Game Boy Color game was a bit special, as it came equipped with a rumble pack and a battery slot to power it. The game itself, developed by Jupiter, takes a few of the series conventions and pinballs it. Hey, it makes more sense than Akira Pinball. Pokemon Pinball features 2 tables, red and blue, where your goal is to rack up a high score. Beyond the tables being designed to match the Pokemon aesthetic, each has a series of locations attached. While locations don't change the tables themselves, they do influence what wild Pokemon can be captured. And that's really the big gimmick of Pokemon Pinball. If you manage to enter Capture mode and unveil the selected Pokemon, you'll be given a chance to capture it if you hit it enough times. Evolving them works slightly differently, with the goal being to hit specific objects based on how the Pokemon you selected would evolve in the mainline games. There's also a few bonus stages you can access, each of which functions like boss fights, with Pokemon like Gengar, Meowth and Mewtwo being among your opponents. A good few years later, Jupiter returned to make a sequel. Pokemon Pinball Ruby and Sapphire does what you'd expect. Aside from fundamental improvements like adding proper screen scrolling, the roster was refreshed to focus on Hoenn Pokemon, new modes and stages were added, and existing modes were tweaked. Pinball Ruby and Sapphire did unfortunately ditch the rumble feature of the original, but if the reviews are any indication, the subseries managed to make the pinball concept work out brilliantly. Despite this, while the main franchise continues to evolve, the pinball games have fallen by the wayside. Let's Trose to the next game. For those with an inclination towards puzzle games instead of the arcade, Pokemon Trose might be for you. Man, I still love the look of this one. This 2006 DS spin-off, known as Pokemon Link in Europe, features an unusual art style reminiscent of Western cartoons, but more importantly, it's a puzzle game focused around matching blocks, or Pokemon in this case. Pokemon Trose is all about creating Pokemon matches, all while taking care to not let the board get completely filled up. But rather than rotate pieces like you would in something like Tetris, you instead manipulate the rows and columns in Trose. Once a match of 4 is made, Trose Chance begins, which lowers the minimum amount of Pokemon needed per match down to 3 and then 2. This bonus period also opens up an opportunity to match Pokemon without them necessarily being arranged in a straight line. It's a simple game on paper, and it ultimately kind of is, but you can have some real brainwaves while playing it. Although a sequel would appear on the 3DS eShop 8 years later, Pokemon Battle Trose will completely change the playing field. The core gameplay was overhauled to focus on battling wild Pokemon, with basic piece manipulation simply revolving around grabbing a Pokemon on the board and swapping it with another one to form matches. Sadly, the last we've seen of this style of Pokemon puzzle game was Pokemon Shuffle, a free-to-play title brought down by microtransactions. The Pokemon Company, needing more money, that's puzzling. This N64 cult classic is also a puzzle game revolving around, oh yeah, block stuff. In keeping with its Pokemon League theming and the gameplay of its predecessor, Tetris Attack, Puzzle League is all about competing against an opponent. In addition to managing your own board, which is slowly rising with new pieces coming in from the bottom, pulling off combos will fill your opponent's board with garbage that they'll have to quickly clear out before they get completely clogged up and lose the match. Beyond the multiplayer mode, there's also a single-player story that puts you in the shoes of none other than Ash Ketchum, one of the participants allowed to challenge the Puzzle League tournament. In gameplay, this means playing against several major characters from the anime, including gym leaders, Elite Four members, and that piece of Gary. As a game from the beginning of the 3D era, Pokemon Puzzle League also features its own 3D mode, which turns your boards into rotatable cylinders, effectively tripling your play space horizontally. Hell yeah. At a Metacritic score of 81, Pokemon Puzzle League is one of the series' best puzzle spin-offs, with only its GBC counterpart, Pokemon Puzzle Challenge, exceeding its critical reception. But in the years since these games were released, the franchise tried to innovate, but most follow-ups unfortunately failed to reach the height of Puzzle League. Pokemon Puzzle fans can now basically just play free-to-play games like Cafe Remix, or shell out for the Nintendo Switch Online expansion tier to experience a forgotten classic. Right, you got sick of thinking? You want more hitting? Here we go.
First strike!
Do you remember Pokemon Stadium? Well, of course you do. Even if you weren't around to play them when they were released, you've likely at least heard of them. The Stadium duology on N64 are beloved battle sims that allow you to upload your Pokemon from the mainline Game Boy games so they can take part in glorious 3D battles. Beyond the obvious multiplayer utility, these games had a surprising amount of single-player content too, with a variety of challenging tournaments to participate in and sick minigames for when you want a breather. While the GameCube did get Colosseum and XD, which were traditional story-first RPGs, the battle sim concept would eventually return in 2007 with Pokemon Battle Revolution for the Nintendo Wii. The idea behind it is much the same. You can upload your Pokemon from the main series, which were Diamond and Pearl in this case, to do battle with friends or in single-player tournaments. As a first for the home console side of the series, there was also online play. Though lacking in overall content and difficulty compared to its predecessors, Battle Revolution stands out for just how good it still looks. Despite being nearly 2 decades old, its detailed Pokemon models and lavish animation work still outshine that of the main series games to this day. Not hard. Even without a full world to explore, the fact that this forgotten spin-off still looks mostly better than new mainline games is a sign that Nintendo, the Pokemon Company, and Game Freak need to step up their game. Giving Game Freak more than 100 yen and 4 weeks to smash 8 textures together should probably be their first quest. Though the voxel-based art style will immediately grab your attention, though maybe not for all the right reasons, this Switch and mobile spin-off, one of the only ones developed by Game Freak themselves, isn't anything like you'd expect it to be. Make no mistake, it's not as interesting as it looks. Pokemon Quest is all about exploring Tumblecube Island by befriending Pokemon, setting them into a team, and throwing them into the game's many stages. The actual gameplay is quite simple. Your Pokemon will seek out wild Pokemon and attack them completely autonomously. There is no actual exploration, and player input is limited to using Pokemon moves, which operate on a cooldown timer, ordering your team to briefly scatter to avoid AoE attacks, or activating an auto mode to automate most of the process. I love not playing my games. The usual mobile game suspects are here, including a stamina system, a leveling system that involves sacrificing unwanted units, and of course, microtransactions. Though Pokemon Quest can be played without spending $1, a variety of junk can be bought in the eShop to speed up your progression. Yay! In the West and Japan alike, Pokemon Quest fizzled out soon after launch, as beyond the awkward controls for the Switch version, the simplistic gameplay, and the contentious mobile game elements, the game never received any major post-launch updates. Chinese players, on the other hand, were treated to a much longer-lasting game, with updates adding in Pokemon from regions other than Kanto, as well as a host of exclusive features. Sadly, this enhanced version of the game would eventually shut down in 2025. Though Pokemon Quest may sound like a fun distraction if crossing the road without looking also sounds fun to you, its repetitive nature and simplistic gameplay means that it's better to just play basically anything else, including this next game, because at least you get something useful out of it. Oh wait, 1 second, I need to make a note on the script here. PLS space SUB.
Maractus. Altaria, you're fast!
Despite what the name might suggest, this edutainment game did not in fact release for PC. Instead, this Genius Sorority developed title was released for the DS in the early 2010s, though North Americans never officially got their hands on it. And of course, to facilitate any typing at all, the game was bundled with a Bluetooth keyboard. Typing adventures lessons are given a simple framework to draw you in. You're part of a research club working with characters like Professor Gwendolyn Warner and Page Down, get it? Q-Werty and Page Down, to catch and research Pokemon, and that means lots and lots of typing. Though useful as a learning aid on paper or on the DS, Typing Adventure does have one major drawback. Pokemon names are often eclectic, eccentric, and hard to grasp. Miss Magius? I'm not no Miss Magius, I make music. So those who don't already have strong foundational knowledge of Pokemon names, appearances, cries, and everyone's favourite streamer game in COVID times can find themselves at a disadvantage. Whether it was because of this or for other reasons, Typing Adventure never received any sort of follow-up, with the next Pokemon edutainment game being Art Academy on the 3DS. Hey, you, what are you gonna do?
Pikachu.
Our final Pokemon game from Umbrella, and the final game for the day overall, is one that also happens to be their first and possibly most iconic. Released in 1998 in Japan and 2000 in the US, with Europe sadly missing out, Hey You Pikachu is a virtual pet game built around the Nintendo 64's voice recognition unit and a microphone. As with some of the other games from Umbrella that we've covered today, Hey You Pikachu is simple in nature and lacking in interactivity. Gameplay involves speaking into a microphone to communicate with a Pikachu, and that's about it. While there are a variety of objectives and missions, everything boils down to telling Pikachu to do something and hoping it understood what you said, made complicated by the game's poor voice recognition. That's basically just this.
What'd he say? Put on our tuxedos?
I want some taquitos.
While Umbrella went on to make games for just over 2 more decades, Hey You Pikachu and its successor, Pokemon Channel, would eventually be forgotten by history. They presumably never made a sequel despite the advances in tech due to Pikachu's royalty payments. Its only legacy? YouTuber fodder, let's be honest. Silly old games are like catnip to us. Hey You Pikachu may have been forgotten by the general public at the time and since, but for as long as YouTube is around, countless people will be able to enjoy the concept of shouting at a yellow rat without it being weird or please get out from my basement. Outro gang, you and me, we're gonna inflate the Watchog 79 promo market. We'll buy them for a penny, we'll sell them for £1, and that's business, baby. Thanks once again to our lovely birds and hatchlings for joining the flock. If you want to do the same, you can do so for just 99 pence or Freedom Cent a month, and you'll get loads of cool free stuff. Well, you have to pay, but you do get stuff. We love stuff. Do you want more Pokemon stuff? I do collect Pokemon cards. I've got 2,000 or 3,000 of these and other good cards. If you want more of that, I could do some more of that. Let me know down below if you have other Pokemon games that have been forgotten. That should be in another video. I've been Jamie for Cultured Vultures. It's been good to have you, and thanks for watching. Bye!